Welcome to Football Today, team profiles and projections. And today we're looking at your Cincinnati Bengals. Came in our power rankings at 8th after a 9-8 season. Last year, not a great year for the Bengals. Offensively, 16th in points per game, 13th in EPA per play. Defensively, this was the surprising part. 21st in scoring, 27th in EPA per play. This is Zach Taylor's sixth season after coming over from the Rams as their offensive coordinator. Has led the Bengals to a Super Bowl. Offensive coordinator Dan Pitcher's first year, Brian Callahan goes to Tennessee. He's actually been with the Bengals since 2016, so he predates Zach Taylor from this group, was the QB coach recently. And then Lou Anarumo, sixth season. He's been there for the whole run after being the Giants DB coach. Justin, the Bengals season can be kind of tied to Joe Burrow missed the final 7 games. But, they were 5-5 with Burrow, 4-3 without him. And the thing with this Cincinnati Bengals team, and this is like just a kind of a random stat, but it shows up true, they need to start stronger. They are 1-7 in weeks 1 and 2 with Joe Burrow as their starting quarterback.
Yes, that is 100% true. And I think they have to know it. They all know it at this point. The good news for the Cincinnati Bengals is that this is the first training camp in Joe Burrow's, I believe, his career, that he hasn't missed a practice during training camp for any injury reason. So 2 thumbs up there, where basically last year, if you want to break down 2022 and some of the other, slow starts that they had, go for it. But last year, I think it was directly tied to the calf, where you had that calf strain that came up, during practice, and then the second that they cleared him from the injury report in week 5, that's when you saw really good Joe Burrow ball. And that week 5 to week 9, week 10 stretch, Bobby, where you had 5 games. Basically, even though Joe Burrow played in more than 5 games last year, they had 5 healthy games of Joe Burrow last year. They went 4-1 in between weeks 5 to 10. They beat the 49ers, the Bills, the Seahawks, the Cardinals. Who did they lose to? The Houston Texans on a field goal as time expired. Bobby, I am a huge believer in get hot, momentum. I love my analytics. I love my EPA per play, but I'm not an analytics guy that's going to sit here and tell you that momentum isn't real and, if you're playing well and if you're playing right ball at the right time, that shit doesn't matter. I think it does matter. And I think the Bengals were catching fire at hey, maybe it was early in the year last year, but I thought that if the Bengals continued and if Joe Burrow stayed healthy, Joe Burrow was performing like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL towards the mid part of last year. I thought that was going to continue. You never know where it's going to lead. I am very, very high on the Cincinnati Bengals this year and also with the offseason that they had as well.
Yeah, I really like the offseason that they had, even though I do think they lost a couple of key guys that I don't know how they're going to replace. But Joe Burrow is one of the best QBs in the NFL, right? I think he's in the majority of people's top 5 quarterbacks when you put out your list for them, because he has total command as a quarterback. Right now, obviously it helps to have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, but he's really good at getting the ball out on the right time and the right places, right? He does a good job of avoiding pressure. He was one of the lowest, he had the 5th lowest pressure rate in the NFL last year, which sounds kind of crazy. Like, oh, don't the Bengals give up a lot of pressure? But he also had the lowest QB allowed pressure rate in the NFL, right? Yes. So usually when you go and look at like the 5 lowest, pressure rate QBs in the NFL, like, they usually, just because their pressure is so little, their numbers for QB allowed are a little higher than everyone else's. But his is the lowest in the NFL.
And I'll tell you what's most impressive about that stat, Bobby. The Cincinnati Bengals are doing the exact opposite of putting 6, 7-man protections around Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow wants the smoke. Joe Burrow wants everybody going out and running around. I think over the last couple of years, Joe Burrow, if maybe there's another quarterback that I'm forgetting, but Joe Burrow has to be the quarterback that's leading the NFL in 5-man protections. It's that offensive line. And even if that offensive line isn't great, and even if they're going to take a sack, Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow do not care. They're going to throw the ball. They're going to operate an offense at their pace, their tempo, their average depth of target that they want to attack that week, the receiver that they want to target that week. Like, Burrow puts it on himself to not make those mistakes. Where even you saw, like, for how well that C.J. Stroud did last year, and this isn't a knock towards C.J. Stroud, but how well that a guy like C.J. Stroud did last year, you see, like, these 6-man protections, 7-man protections, and then that allows you time and an infrastructure to throw the ball downfield. Joe Burrow owns it, man. He owns that pocket, even with those 5-man protections usually all the time. They don't believe in blocking tight ends in Cincinnati. They don't believe in running backs staying in and pass protecting. It's all on that offensive line, and more importantly, it's all on Joe Burrow, and he does it really well.
Yeah, they like you said, they live out of empty. 5 in, 5 out. Now you can live and die. Like, I know he wasn't pressured a lot last year, but there has been times where the hits are coming consistently to Joe Burrow, right? Even in that Super Bowl run, I think they gave up 8 sacks versus the Tennessee Titans that year. Obviously, they've changed offensive lines around, but it does leave you vulnerable. The issue is they're just so good at it, right? So it's like it's hard to go away from it because that's when they're at their best, is when they're out of empty, when they are, totally spread out, not asking their tight ends to block, because most of them, unless you're Drew Sample, none of them can block anyways. And they just kind of live out there, but they do it because they have guys like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, right? I mean, in this passing game, and you have a top 5 wide receiver in Jamar Chase, over 1,400 yards as a rookie, 1,000 yards missing 5 games his second year, and then 1,200 yards last year after missing a game, and missing Joe Burrow for 7 games as well too. I mean, he's a dog, and he's been that since he's stepped onto the field in the NFL.
Yeah, and Chase it's all part of a passing offense that when it's all going right, they're explosive. When it's all going right, they're avoiding third down, and it's all on them. Like, if I had to pick I mentioned I'm an analytics guy. If I had to pick my offense that, like, modern day, like, picture perfect cookie cutter, like, throw the damn ball offense, it is the Cincinnati Bengals because of the weapons that they have, the quarterback that they have, and even the coaching that they have as well. And the fact that, Bobby, like you mentioned all these things that are good. Last year was not a good year for the Cincinnati Bengals. Like, you mentioned that they got off to that slow start. They lose Joe Burrow, but in a way, it should have been much worse than a 9-win season. Like, look at the defense. The defense allowed the second most pass plays tied for the second most pass plays of 20-plus yards. This last year was not a team that should have won 9 games, yet they won 9 games.
Yeah, like you said, the defense had a very down year. And then, missing Joe Burrow for 7 games, and then the fact that you went 5-5 with Joe Burrow starting off so slow. But again, with this offense as a whole, right? It lives through Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. Like, I like T. Higgins a lot. Right? He's a 1,000-yard guy. He's deserves to get paid. Doesn't he's on the franchise tag. Like, to me, Chase is like a couple levels above Higgins as far as you view them just as like wide receivers in the
100%.
NFL. Not even just like their roles on the team, but like tiers of wide receivers. It really, really goes through Chase. But I think there's going to be a lot more on a T. Higgins plate now that you lost Tyler Boyd in the slot, right?
Oh, yeah, and that's actually where I want to kind of transition to next. Because I don't think this is going to be an offense, now that you lost Tyler Boyd, let's run the ball a little bit more. Oh, you're bringing Zach Moss. I really love Chase Brown and his explosive ability. He's a guy that I like. The last rounds of my fantasy draft, I may be targeting him. But Bobby, who do you think is going to be third on this team in receiving? Whether you want to filter that by yards, by catches or yards, go right ahead. But now that Boyd is gone, it's a question.
It seems like it's going to be Andre Yosevich, the guy from Princeton. Remember him down at the Senior Bowl a couple years ago, track runner, kind of a raw player. He's become that third guy. Are
you basing that off of, like, did you look into that?
Yeah, because I was like, who is it going to be? Because I like Charlie Jones a lot. They just drafted Jermaine Burton in the 3rd round. So I kind of, went to go like, all right, how's camp playing out? And it's like,
Trenton Irwin has been like the slot guy there the last couple years that I kind of just thought that he was just going to be the slot guy and just move up on the depth chart.
No, it seems like Andre Josivich,
Wow.
I think this is his third year out of Princeton.
No, I think this is his second year, Bobby.
I can't remember what year we saw him down the Senior Bowl.
It was 2 years ago. I'm gonna confirm, but man, that really is a surprise to me because dude, he was a raw prospect. Yeah, this is his second year, Bobby.
Yeah, and they've really taken a light. Now this could all change once the season actually starts. But even then, it still is wide open of like who those. They drafted Jermaine Burton in the third round. They're going to want to get something out of him. Charlie Jones is a guy who I think will just kind of find his way on the field and do well whenever he gets that opportunity. And he has a big role there as a returner. It's just about staying healthy. He had a camp injury that held him out a little bit. But I think Josivich is getting that role, which is why I think Josivich is fast. I think that's why they're going to rely on Tyler Boyd because Jamar Chase gets so much targets and so much run anyways. I think they're going to have to rely on T. Higgins to be a little more, down to down, move the chains than he has been in the past.
Bobby, I think Mike Gesicki is going to be the third receiver on the team. The third leading receiver. Tanner Hudson had 39 catches last year.
Yeah.
For 352 yards, 9 yards per reception and a touchdown. I think Gesicki is in a really good spot where I think he did some decent things with New England last year, but still, that's not really a spot where
Burrow's
Gesicki's
a
going to
lifter
thrive.
of tight ends.
Yes. And, Gesicki with his last year with Miami, with the first year with Mike McDonald, hey, that's not really a match that was made in heaven at all. That he wants guys that can block. That is not a requirement here. All tight ends, like that's even why I wanted Jatavion Sanders to come to Cincinnati and be drafted, the kid from Texas, because it's like if you're a tight end that maybe is somewhat athletic, and you can't block, come down to Cincinnati. So I am kind of excited for maybe to see some good Mike Gesicki stuff. It's been like 2 or 3 years since we've seen some really good consistent stuff. I think he's going to be like the third leading receiver on this team.
I thought third wide receiver. I think Gesicki will too, right? Tanner Hudson is someone who can move a little bit, but you don't want to rely on him. I know they like Eric All out of Iowa, but he's a rookie. Gesicki, we forget, like you said, New England last year's a bad situation, and Miami, that wasn't a fit, and that was clear from the moment Mike McDaniel was hired. He did put up back-to-back 700-yard years for the Dolphins, right? Like he does have some talent. There's a reason why he was drafted in the second round out of Penn State and put up some production. And Joe Burrow is just the ultimate, like, hey, you wanna get a contract or have your career year at tight end? Come be a Cincinnati Bengal.
Yeah, man.
They also have Drew Sample, who I think should get this. I mean, Drew Sample gets a ton of snaps, but he's kind of their blocking guy.
Mm-hmm.
He plays fullback. He played almost half the snaps last year. He gives them that blocking option, but we know he's not going to be a part of the receiving game, or at least not much. But I do think Gesicki is that because I think he's the clear head, the number one receiver for the tight ends, and for that number 3 wide receiver, I think you're going to get a handful of guys.
For sure. Where do you want to move now? You want to move to the run game?
Yeah, the offense. How do you feel about this offensive line? Because I actually really like Orlando Brown and Trent Brown. I think that Trent Brown, when he's engaged and part of a winning team, I think Trent Brown is actually a pretty good offensive tackle. Orlando Brown's solid. I just worry about this interior a lot.
Tell me about your concerns that you have with the interior.
I just think it's bad, right? Alex Kappa, like he's the guy that they paid. There's talks of like Matt Lee, their 7th round center out of Miami and UCF, possibly working his way in the center. Cordell Volson hasn't been very good for them. I worry that they're just going to give up a ton of pressure up the middle. And I like Orlando Brown and Trent Brown, but they're not the best tackle duo in the world. They're the biggest tackle duo in the world, but I don't know if they're the best tackle duo in the world. And I don't think Alex Kappa's been as good as advertised when they grabbed him.
But if there's one team, I get it. Now, this would be a concern in the playoffs where pass rush is amplified and, hey, we're playing really good football teams. I'm not concerned about this in the regular season. This is a playoff question where the Cincinnati Bengals are somehow playing the New York Jets in the divisional round or in the wild card round. Bengals win the division. Jets finish in wild card from the Bills that win it. And then I'm like, oh my God, I'm really worried about Quinnen Williams just dominating that line. Does that make sense? Because I just trust that Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow are going to do enough during the regular season to just make this okay.
I agree. Like I'm not worried or like, oh, it's gonna tank their season. But this is kind of like a Super Bowl or bust team.
It is.
Obviously, only one team can win it this year, but like that's the expectation. Like I think anything less, as long as Joe Burrow's on this team, and especially with the receivers he has, this is just the expectation. And I worry about that interior once you get in the playoffs and that giving you some issues.
Yeah, for sure.
So we'll see. But so you like Chase Brown a lot, right?
I do.
You only got 44 carries as a rookie. They added Zach Moss. How do you feel about this run game? Because it was really bad last year.
No, but even just Chase Brown, I think as a prospect from Illinois, I believe he was explosive back there. He had some opportunities last year. Averaged 4.1 yards per carry. The success rate wasn't great. I think he's a receiving threat out of the backfield, averaged more than 10 yards per reception. I just think if Zach Moss is going to be your kind of more methodical, more just down and down out, a little bit more efficient but boring, but I think Chase Brown can give you that explosive play option, and maybe between the 20s can be the main back, and then Zach Moss can be the punch it in type of back. That's what I think the dynamic can be, and I'm excited to see what that can be for the Bengals this year with Chase Brown.
Right. Let's talk about the defense. This is Lou Anarumo's 6th year. Again, he's been here for the entire Zach Taylor ride. Bend don't break style. I like Anarumo a lot. Like their coverage distribution is very diverse, right? You go look at like coverage usage around the league. I mean, for him, it's like 20%, 20%, 20%. Like they throw different things at you. Last year, though, was a bad year for that defense. Right, I talked about the rankings. They were 28th in passing yards, 26th in rushing yards, 36th in yards per attempt passing, 31st in yards per carry rushing. I mean, they were just flat out bad last year, and I think it's a number of things. They lost some good players and gave some young guys big roles that they weren't ready for. And I also think some of their best players didn't step up to the plate, right? Like Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt. Those guys, I really like that linebacker duo. It's one of my favorite linebacker duos in the NFL.
I agree.
They both had down years. And then they, had Dax Hill working at safety and DJ Turner at outside corner, 2 back-to-back, early picks for them. And both really struggled. You lost Jesse Bates. You lost Von Bell and gave these young guys roles. And it was just, they were bad. Like, they just gave up big plays. They allowed teams to work methodically. They were just kind of a defense that a lot of guys could take advantage of.
But I like the infrastructure that they have now. And I do think some of these young guys are going to improve. And also, I think, more importantly, Lou Anarumo is going to improve as well. Bobby, this is a coach who, for years, we've recognized as a big game defensive coordinator, right? He's been one of the only defense coordinators to kind of consistently know what to do when they play Patrick Mahomes in a big game, right? So I trust that even though Lou Anarumo had a bad year last year, you put a little too much stock, and I think this is a defense, and Lou is going to generally put a lot of pressure on the secondary to help out the pass rush, but then also your pass rush is ideally going to help out your secondary too. I think Lou Anarumo is going to evolve. And if we're going to see early on, within the first 5 to 6 weeks of the season, within the first month of the season, let's put some pressure on the secondary. Let's see if they can hold up, so our pass rush can get home up front, and we can allow the front to do the things that they need to do, and give Trey Hendrickson an extra quarter of a second to get another QB hit and to get another sack, which he's really, really good at doing. But if within those 5 to 6 weeks, if it's bad again, then I do trust Lou to adjust and make things better, because that's what this coaching staff does, offensively and defensively. They will make changes.
Just the moving of the secondary as far as, like, Dax Hill's going back to cornerback.
Yeah, which I love that, by the way. I love that.
Uber athletic. Bringing Geno Stone and bringing Von Bell back, right? Losing now, you're not replacing Jesse Bates, right? We saw what he did for Atlanta and how big of a loss that was for Cincinnati. I'm sure they probably wish they kept him at this point, but they did get to bring back Von Bell, which hurt them a lot. You bring in Geno Stone. I think Jordan Battle played well towards the end of the year and is just a solid safety option for them. So they can do some 3 safety stuff, which Anarumo's going to like to do. But it's just on these, Cam Taylor-Britt, like, he's, again, sometimes he looks like an all-pro, and there's other times where he's not the best in the world. Yeah. You have Mike Hilton in the nickel, who's like one of the best run-defending nickels, but not the greatest in coverage. My X factor is Dax Hill, because I think so much relies on it. Because if he's someone that teams can just pick on at that outside corner spot, like, are you going to put DJ Turner back on? Like, DJ Turner belongs in the nickel anyways. Like, that should have been on his draft profile coming out of Michigan, and he was really bad for them last year. So, like, I think he belongs in the nickel anyways. Are you going to put DJ Turner back out on the outside? Like, I think Dak Hill playing outside corner is a huge thing for them.
Yeah, and I wonder if he's even going to start right away, because I do think Cam Taylor-Britt is going to be your number 1 corner.
Obviously.
But then it's DJ Turner or Dax Hill, because DJ Turner was the starter last year, and Dax Hill barely played in the second preseason game, which, take that as you may. PFF didn't update. I don't even know if they played their 3rd preseason game yet.
It seems like Dax Hill is going to be that starter for them. That's what all the reports are saying. Which
I love that, man. I love Dax Hill. He was a guy that I wanted my favorite team to take. I think I even mocked that at one point in the second round, but he went in the first round, and I think it's very worth it. So I think that's a great X factor. Very excited to see what he can do. Let's talk about this pass rush. What do you got?
I mean, I love Trey Hendrickson, right? 17.5 sacks, 10 hits, 49 pressures, 16 tackles for loss. 10th in total sacks, hits, and pressures, 6th in pass rush win rate, and 3rd in pressure rate. I mean, he's real deal. I do have a little bit of worries about the rest of the group, because you lost DJ Reader, which is huge
loss.
It's a gigantic loss.
It's the biggest
right?
loss.
Like, I'm like, think of like Super Bowl contending teams, right? Who lost a bigger piece in this, right? Kansas City, L'Jarius Sneed. Like, I think that's similar, right? That's the type of player that I think DJ Reader is.
Yeah. Now, I will give the Bengals a little bit of credit, though. Similarly happened with Carl Lawson, where it's like, oh man, they really let him go. Why did they pay this guy Trey Hendrickson, big money? Why are you kind of relying on Sam Hubbard to take a step up? They like to do this thing. They did it with Bates, but like you said, they may regret it. They do like to do this thing because they know they're not an organization that's gonna shell out a ton of money, and they almost operate like they're a small market baseball team in a way, where their scouting staff is pretty small. Their front office is pretty small compared to the rest of the league. Their front office really like relies on film. They're film dudes. They don't have a big analytics staff. So they try and get ahead of like, all right, well, we're not going to pay Carl Lawson. Even if it's 2 years too early, we're not going to pay him. And we're going to rely on the guys that we have. So interested to see what happens with DJ Reader, because they do have Sheldon Rankins, and then they just drafted Chris Jenkins. So, but DJ Reader for this year, for this all-in Cincinnati Bengals team, it's a huge, huge loss.
Yeah, it's a huge loss. I mean, BJ Hill's been really good for them, since they traded for him a few years ago. But I just don't think Sheldon Rankins and Chris Jenkins is coming close to the impact that he has. The other thing that hurts is Miles Murphy just got injured like a few days before recording this.
Oh.
And listen, I like Miles Murphy, so I was hoping for a year or two jump, but they kind of needed it, right? Like Sam Hubbard's a, up and down player. Osai's a solid player at times. Cam Sample's been awful. Like I really thought Miles Murphy was going to have a nice year too, especially opposite Trey Hendrickson.
I mean, first round pick. I'm sure they really wanted that.
I mean, he's not out for the whole year though, but he's probably out for the first half of the season.
Yeah, that sucks.
And then the other thing with him is Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt need to step up, right? They need to be better in coverage. They need to do more to sniff out stuff in the run. Both of those guys I thought had a down year, despite the fact that I'm totally on board with those guys getting paid and being on that team.
Yep.
Like tight ends killed them last year, and I thought both those linebackers are a big part of it. And Lou Anarumo is going to put a lot on their plate, and they need to step up. They're being paid to step up to the plate on that. You want to go through their draft class?
Yes.
We got Amarius Mims in the first round, probably not going to play this year. At least they're hoping he doesn't. Chris Jenkins in the second round. Jermaine Burton in the third round. McKinley Jackson also in the third round. Eric All in the fourth round. Tight end out of Iowa. Cornerback Josh Newton fifth. Tanner McLaughlin sixth. Cedric Johnson sixth. DeJohn Anthony sixth. And then Matt Lee, center out of Miami, seventh. I don't love this class. What I will say is I see guys that are going to contribute, right? Matt Lee supposedly has had a great camp in preseason. And if one guy goes down on the interior, he may be playing for them. Eric All, I think he fits Joe Burrow, right? So now you get him here for 4 years. We'll see how stuff
Does he remind you of Gesicki at all?
Yes, very much so. Very much so. Obviously, Gesicki's like a superior athlete coming out, but I really liked Eric All. He's just been plagued by injuries. Jermaine Burton, Cincinnati's done a good job of getting the most out of some troublesome guys in the past, but he's no doubt talented. Chris Jenkins, I think will be solid for them, nothing special. And then Mims has the ability to be just dominant. It's just we haven't seen enough from him to really declare that.
Yeah, I don't know if Mims is raw, but he's definitely inexperienced. I think that's the main thing with Mims, and I'm really, really excited to see what he can evolve and what he can turn into. As the years go on, or even if he gets to play this year as well. Jermaine Burton, dude, he had like an average depth of target of 20 yards. He didn't have a single drop, and I know he's a hothead, and I don't know the ins and outs of his career at Alabama, but you watch a national game, and Alabama isn't the same offense as it was a couple years ago when you had all those when you had Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle running around there, but they had Jermaine Burton, and he was electric, man. Electric. Where I even think this year, I can imagine they maybe want to bring him on a little slow, but I can also imagine him this year having a big impact with Burrow and Higgins and Jamar Chase, since the attention won't be on him. So I like this class, man. I really do. And there's even some good things about. I was listening to a podcast, even about like Josh Newton. He's like a physical corner, very handsy corner. McKinley Jackson was a Senior Bowl guy, I think. So. Solid class by the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, again, I don't see star. Now, Mims could be a star. Burton could be really good. I don't see stars, but I do see a lot of contributors for a team that's going to need contributors from their young players as they start to pay people, or at least hopefully pay people. Pay Jamar Chase. I'm actually kind of on the Bengals where it's like, I don't know if we need to.
They're not going to pay T. Higgins.
Pay T. Higgins, right? Now, if you better fucking use that money somewhere else. But if you're making a decision, I can see that. But hey, Burton maybe could force their hand. What would my X factor was Dax Hill. Who's your X factor?
Chase Brown. I think if now that Joe Mixon's fully out, if you can get an explosive play guy, whether it's catching the ball out of the backfield or even in the run game, because the running game and that running back room, if you had to rank it, they're probably maybe bottom 4. Bottom 5, you would rank the running back room just based on names. So if Chase Brown could be a guy that kind of bursts onto the scene a little bit and helps out an offense that is just inevitably going to throw the ball a lot, that would be huge.
Yeah, he's kind of. It's to me, it's one of the more. I mean, Zach Moss had a good year last year, but it's like a very unknown room. What are we going to get out of Chase Brown? I want to check something on Chase Brown real quick. I should have looked up this before. Did he fumble last year? Because I remember at the Senior Bowl.
He has a fumble problem. He had 1 fumble in 44 attempts.
Okay, so he had 1 fumble.
But yeah,
he did have I remember at the Senior Bowl, he kept on
fumbling,
and it was driving me nuts. I think he did it at Iowa too, or Illinois.
Illinois, yeah. He had an issue with that.
Over under 10.5 wins.
Over. I think this team is I think this team is winning the Super Bowl this year.
You think this team's winning the Super Bowl this year?
Yeah. I think this is the year.
So I'm over as well. Tell me, outside of Joe Burrow, what is your main reason that this team is going to win a Super Bowl?
I think the offensive line's better. I think Jonah Williams is an addition by subtraction.
Which is crazy how he just kind of started good and then went down.
Yeah, man. Even Mims, if you're talking about Mims as depth, and if a guy gets hurt, that he can kind of go in. Like you said, the interior's a concern, but I just trust Zach Taylor. I trust Joe Burrow. I trust the trajectory that they were on last year, and I also trust Lou Anarumo to get this defense better in a better spot.
That's my biggest thing.
I'm sorry, they cut you off. The only team, and when we're talking about, oh man, the Kansas City Chiefs had their down year last year, who is going to step up and beat them? The Cincinnati Bengals, they have before. They have. And I think they could do it again.
That is my biggest thing on why I'm high on this team and why I think they're going to win the AFC North is Lou Anarumo is going to figure it out with that defense, right? And they are really bad, but Lou Anarumo is going to figure it out. They have enough talent to figure it out. It's going to get figured out there. It just depends on how good are they. They've always been kind of middling in the pack yards and then good in points. Can they be a team? Can he still be like that big QB killer with Anarumo? So anyways, that is the Cincinnati Bengals, and this is Football Today.